games. It's ScrubGames. Drop a like, drop a sub, go ahead and subscribe to ScrubGames. Drop a like, drop a sub, go ahead and subscribe to ScrubGames.
How's it going, Scrub Gamers? Welcome back to another video here at ScrubGames, and today we have the next installment of my Understanding How to Build series, where we go over all the leaders in a given set to help you understand how to build them to suit you and your playstyle. Now we've covered the villainy side of Cunning, and now we're moving on to the heroic side, and starting off with the two heroic leaders we have for Cunning in set 4, we have Admiral Ackbar as the one we're covering today. So, if you're interested, stay tuned. Also, don't forget, you can always like, comment, and subscribe to keep you updated with my videos as and when they drop, and also click that notification bell as well to then get alerts when my videos do drop so you can watch them there and then, or at a later time if it suits you better. So, that is it for this. So, let's go ahead and dive into understanding how to build Admiral Ackbar. So, we always like to start off with the leader because in Star Wars Unlimited, it's a leader-focused game because you can't really play without one. And they're going to be what you build your deck around. And essentially, you start off the game with a leader and base, and those determine kind of how you win or lose the game with your base and how you're going to play with your leader. Because some leaders are very generic in that they can basically don't really focus on a certain theme, whereas some of them are very specific in a certain trait or way to play. So it's best to kind of have a look and see what they do and see how they want to play. So for Admiral Ackbar, he's the first of the heroic leaders in Cunning. So he's got the heroic trait and the Cunning trait, or in the color terms, yellow and white. He's also a rebel and official, so you don't really get much benefit from the official trait for him, but you do get some benefit from the rebels because rebels are a main trait for the heroic side. He also deploys he deploys as a ground unit, so he doesn't have that new alternative deploy where you can deploy either as a ground unit or an upgrade on a vehicle. So he just deploys as a ground unit, and he does so as 6 more resources. So that means as early as turn 5 you can deploy him and drop him in the ground arena, and he comes down as a free 8, which is not too bad because it means 8 health is quite bulky. It's going to be hard to take him down with that much health. And he's like way out of the range of takedown, which is cool. And free power is not too bad. It's not the best amount of power, but is a solid amount of power. And his effect is quite generic. It's all about tapping down units and then creating those X-Wing tokens, the new kind of tokens we got from this set. So he does it in 2 different ways, and it's the same on both sides, essentially, just in different ways to trigger it. So when he's in the leader area, you use it as an action by paying 1 resource, so you've got to be on a resource behind to be able to trigger this when you're playing, and then tap him as well, so you have to tap him so you can't use it multiple times. And then you exhaust a non-leader unit, so any non-leader unit, yours or your opponent's, and then if you do, its controller creates an X-Wing token, so you can either rest your own unit to then create an X-Wing token, which is a 2/2 space unit, or a space token, or you rest one of your opponent's units, and then you rest their units so they can't attack you, but they then get a 2/2 space wing token. So there's the benefits of that, and then when he does deploy, his effect is now it's switched from an action to an action where you need to pay and tap, to now just being a on-attack effect. So as soon as he attacks, you can then exhaust a unit, so any unit now, so it goes from being a non-leader unit in the leader area to basically any unit when he's deployed and can attack. And then if you do, once again, its controller creates an X-Wing token. So the nice thing about his effect is you can use this to kind of tap down your opponent's cards, or your opponent's units at least, not cards because you can't tap resources. But you can tap your opponent's units down to stop them from attacking, but you do give them more units with a space token, which is 2/2, which is fairly decent in terms of attacking. And when he's deployed, you can then start resting on anything, even leaders, with this as well. So you can keep swinging, tapping on leaders so they can't attack with it. And then when they do get a token, the token doesn't come in active, ready, it comes in exhausted, so it doesn't get attacked straight away, but you at least forward an attack, which is not too bad. So he's got quite a solid solid effect, and it's quite generic as well, so there's no specific kind of theme from him. He's very generic, so you can play him in almost any way. So that's the leader, so hopefully that's helped you understand Admiral Ackbar and what he wants to do, and what he can do. And also do remember that since set 2, all leaders have had showcases. And this is Admiral Ackbar. Now, it's the stuff of nightmares, because Like at least with the normal one, you've got like the kind of it's a trap kind of meme with the art, and now with this one with the showcase, it's like yeah, the stuff of nightmares. It looks really creepy and really odd for Ackbar. But do remember that showcases are just alternative arts, so it means they're just shinier versions of the leader that you can play and get if you want to play the lead. Now with art, it's subjective, so it's all down to preference and opinion. So if you don't like it, that's fair enough. But if you do like it, that is also fair enough, because you can then pick it up and play it. If you don't like it, then you just don't get it. So that is the leader, and that's all covered. And then what I like to do with this series is make sure I cover it for all levels. So whether you're brand new to the game or you're like seasoned veteran, it has everything to cover for you. So what we're going to do for the newer players that have maybe watched this and want to learn how to play the game as well as Ackbar, I'm going to quickly go over some basic information to help them out. So if you're brand new, stay tuned, we'll get some basic information to help you out so you can understand it a bit more. But if you're a seasoned veteran and you feel like you don't need this kind of basic information, feel free to check the description down below. It has timestamps to kind of go to different parts of the video. So if you feel like you don't need this and want to skip ahead, feel free to use that, and they're easily noted for your reference as well. So let's get into some basic information for you newbies. Now the first bit of information we're going to go over is bases, because there's currently two types of bases in the game. And they are the common bases, which all have fairy health and basically just vary on like art and name and stuff. And you have the rare bases, which vary in their health total and compensate with that with an effect. So rare bases have effects but different healths, while common bases have the same health and stats and stuff like that. Now the bases are essential because they are just like your leader, where they're essential to play the game, and they are how you determine if you win or lose the game. Because the only way to win or lose a game of Star Wars Unlimited is to do enough damage to a base that equals its health. So if you do it to your opponent, you win the game. If your opponent does it to you, they win the game. Very simple. So we're going to get into the kind of bases now and kind of see what the benefits are and what they are. And we'll start with the rare ones. So with the rare bases, we have, I think, yeah, I say 12. We have technically 13 because we have an aspectless base, but we don't really talk about that. But yeah, we've had 3 sets out of the 4 so far that have had rare bases. So we had the top ones there from set 1, which epic actions, and each each set's rare bases have a theme. For the first set is all about epic actions, so just like a deploy is an action you need to use an action to trigger, and then once they're used, that's it, they're gone. They're one-time uses. And in set 2, we didn't get any rare bases. We had 2 sets where we had just the same rare bases, being from set 1. Then for set 3, we got some more rare bases, but the theme for set 3 was all about leaders and deploying. And I haven't put them in because, one, it doesn't fit the graphic because it's basically just there's too many to put in, and we won't be able to see much. I want to make sure it's clear and you can kind of see examples of them. And as well as that, they're not really built for competitive, not normal Premier competitive. They're built for Twin Suns. And that's because their effects are focused on deploying and your leader being out. And since you have 2 leaders in Twin Suns rather than 1 compared to Premier, then you get more benefits out there. And with the health totals, not really worth running in competitive outside some niche cases, so they're kind of left out because they're better for Twin Suns. And that brings us to the last one, being the kind of set 4 rare bases we got. And the theme for them are about they're about like opening hand and deck size. Now for the set 1 ones, because it's best to go over the ones we haven't bought on the screen. The set 1 ones, they all have 25 health, and they have an epic action each, and they vary in kind of levels of play. So ECL, or Energy Conversion Lab, which is the green one, this one was the best base for set 1, and then also again in set 2 because we didn't have any new rare bases to kind of compete with it because of what it did. And then given how the game's shifted and how the meta's changed, Tarkin Town then took that spot of best base from set 3 onwards, just due to how the game's evolved and what things have come out in each set. And like I said, set 3 bases we don't really play, and they're like kind of only good for niche cases for certain leaders. But then we got the set 4 ones, which first of all gave us the first kind of bases where they had more health than just 30, because usually the rare bases had less health. This set gave us the ones that have more health. And like I said, the theme for this set's one, is all about deck size and also opening hand. So the ones that increase and decrease your deck size are the green and red one, being Data Vault for green and Ferocity for red. They increase or decrease your deck size, and normally the more health you have, the more negative effect, while you get a more positive effect from less health. So Data Vault, it gives you 3 more health, but the takeaway from that, you have to have 10 more cards in your deck at minimum. So that means rather than have a 50 card minimum, you now have a 60 card minimum, and that can be beneficial or not, depending on how you feel. Now, for a Foam Oscillator, you get 3 less health, but to compensate for that, you get 5 less cards in your deck, meaning now instead of a minimum of 50, you have a minimum of 45. So, differences, nice difference there, so it makes it more consistent, where it's least consistent with Data Vault, or more consistent with Foam Oscillator. Now, the other two are the ones that kind of affect your opening hand, with Colossus having 5 more health, so of course it's going to have a more negative effect, and for that 5 extra health, you start off with 1 less card in your hand. Now, it doesn't sound that bad, or it might sound like horrible, because you'll start with one less card, being 5 instead of 6, but it's depending how you feel you can use it and what kind of benefits you can get from that. You're technically getting 5 more health, which is pretty good, but you're losing 1 card as a sacrifice for it. Now, with Nabat Village, this is going to be more positive on the effect because it's got less health. And what it allows you to do is start off with 3 more cards in your opening hands. You see 9 cards instead of 6, but you lose your mulligan. So you don't have a mulligan, so unlike every other deck, where you can see a total of 12 cards over 2 hands, so a set of 6, mulligan to another set of 6, so that's 12 cards total, you get to see 1 set of 9, and that's it. And you might be thinking that's not as great, you're losing out on 3 cards, but you see more cards in 1 hand, which means you get a more consistent opening of seeing what you want, stuff to start off on your first turn, stuff to see in your early turns, and make a more consistent opening hand. And that's just the benefit of having a more consistent opening hand to make sure you don't whiff, or basically make sure you have something to play. Because when you have that kind of opening, when you have no turn 1 play, it feels bad, but Nabat Village helps you make that less of a likelihood and more consistent. But the thing is, you might be thinking 9 cards, that's amazing, you get to keep 9 cards, but you don't get to keep them, because it's got another effect where at the start of the first action phase, you put 3 cards from your hand on the bottom of your deck in an order you choose. So you don't get to keep those 3 cards, which would be bust if you could, but you get to at least see those extra 3 cards and make sure your hand is a bit more consistent, so increase your chances of opening with being able to play the game and not kind of brick. So those are all the rare bases. Now, if you feel like any of those rare bases are not worth playing, you can always go ahead and play the common bases, or they call vanilla bases. I call them vanilla because the term in TCGs refer to things that don't have an effect, because they're just plain. Now, these are just all the same health, they're all the same health, and they only vary by their aspect, name, location, and art. And from set 4, you don't have any benefit to having a certain kind of name or location, so essentially with these kind of bases, you pick your aspect you want for your base, and then within that aspect, you pick your favorite art and play that. Now, these are my preferred arts for the vanilla bases, or common bases. Now, the top ones are the new Hyperspace Foil, which is the first that you can get now from older bases, thanks to them being in the Twin Suns deck boxes from GameGenic. And then you have the bottom 4, which are my preferred arts from the bases for the new set. So that is the basis. Hopefully that's helped you understand with the base when you like what the kind of options are and what you can kind of do with them. Now we're going to go on to the next part, being the aspects. So the next bit of information we've got for you newbies is the aspects, because there are 6 in this game. There are the 4 color ones, being Vigilance for blue, Command for green, Aggression for red, and then Cunning for yellow. And then alongside them you also have the 2 that represent the light and dark sides of the Star Wars universe, being Villainy, which is, well, I think I always thought it was black, but it's actually purple, and then Heroism, which is the white aspect. Now, these all have unique ways to play and unique styles, so we're going to quickly go over them to see if any of them kind of sound great and suit what you want to kind of do or how you play, so you can see what the benefits are of them. Now, what we're going to do as the first examples are Villainy and Heroism, because these are very unique in that Villainy normally showcases all the antagonists of the Star Wars universe, and they feature very controlling and destructive effects given how they are, given that it's Villainy. And then you've got Heroism, which features the protagonists of the Star Wars universe, and they feature more supportive and protective effects, given that how the light side of the Force, or light side of the Star Wars universe, kind of focus in the films and the lore and stuff. So they're very one's very destructive and controlling, one is very rebellious and supportive. So those are those 2 aspects. And the nice thing about these 2 aspects as well is, unlike the color ones, they are unique in that they can also be on their own cards and also feature with the Ever aspects as well together on a card. So you can get both them, like Heroism on its own, and also with one of the color aspects too. Now for the Ever aspects, let's have a look and see what they kind of how they play. So the first one we're going to go over is Vigilance. This is the blue aspect, and this is all about kind of control, because it offers you very nice things like healing, protection, and also removal. Because you've got healing in terms of like healing your base units, protection in either protecting your base from attacks with sentinels, or even protecting units with shields, and also removal in effects and also events. Now, if you like a very controlling, patient playstyle, Vigilance is going to be a perfect one for you because of all the things it kind of offers to support that kind of way to play. So that's Vigilance. Then we have Command, and I'm guessing you've if you've played, I don't know if you played TCGs before, like if you have played TCGs before, but when they have a resource management system where you kind of have to have resources or things to be able to play cards, they usually have one that allows you to ramp to increase your resources or your kind of mana, or if you've gone for magic, so you can play more things quicker or play bigger things quicker. And that is what Command is the ramp aspect, because it allows you to increase your resources using effects and other units and events and stuff like that. So then ramp up resources so you can play more things out quicker or bigger things out quicker to overwhelm your opponent. So if you like to overwhelm your opponent with a massive board presence or big things and like with a commanding force, Command is perfect for you to try out. And then we got Aggression, and kind of you might be already familiar with what this kind of wants to do because it's written in the name. And Aggression is the aggressive aspect. So it's got very aggressive with like just throwing out damage willy-nilly. He wants to just throw it out either by like effects or by attacking. So you throw damage out to your opponent's units or your opponent's base. They're trying to achieve victory at all costs. If you want to be if you are very aggressive in your playstyle and like to just throw out damage and try to achieve victory at almost any cost, then Aggression is a perfect one for you to try out, and is mainly what the aggro decks all have. And that brings to the last one, being Cunning. And if you like this one, the good thing is Ackbar comes equipped with it, because that's one of the aspects on him. And Cunning is like the jack of all trades one, because what it offers you is basically a way to play almost any way possible. Because you can you can have almost anything to deal with your opponent's strategy, and even disrupt their strategy with anything kind of Cunning. And you got things like bouncing, resting, exhausting technically, discard, things like that. You got an answer for almost anything, and many options Cunning. So if you like to have an answer for almost anything your opponent might throw at you, and then rebound it back and have an answer for anything they might drop, then Cunning is perfect to go for. So those are the aspects, and like I said, you start off with a leader and a base, and your leader covers two aspects, being one of the two villainy or heroism ones, and then it comes equipped with a color one, and then you got a never color one thanks to your base. And since the leader always the same, and you just add a different base, that gives you 4 different aspect combos. And these are the 4 different aspect combos. So for a blue base, gives you yellow blue, a green base will give you yellow green, a red base will give you yellow red, and if you go for a yellow base, that'll give you double yellow, which gives you access to those double aspect cards. Now we'll see how many of those double aspect cards there are and what the benefits are of them. But first we need to go over something more important before we get into that point, which is the aspect penalty. Now this is an important thing to note, because when it comes to building, playing Star Wars, when it comes to building your deck, you can put absolutely anything in your deck unless it's suspended. And you can always check the suspended list on the Star Wars Limited website. And if it's not suspended, you can play it out and you can put it in your deck, and it means you can just put anything in there. But when it comes to actually playing the card, that is where the aspect penalty comes into force. Because if you didn't know what it is essentially if you want to play a card, if the aspects on any of the aspects on a card do not match what's on your leader and or base, then you have to pay an extra 2 on top for every aspect that doesn't match. So here I have a handy dandy guide, and I know that people play it they learn in different ways. Some people learn by listening, some people learn by seeing, and some people learn by doing. So I like to make sure I have at least 2 of those by having a nice handy dandy reference, or like a kind of guide shown on screen there, and then go over it as well, so you can kind of cover 2 different ways to play, to learn. And if you want to kind of learn the other way, you can always just get into playing games and just try it for yourself. So here I've got a handy dandy little example of Ackbar with a green base. That gives us access to Heroism, Cunning a command, or in color terms, white, yellow, green. So for the first example, will be in the top box. If you were to play a card and all the aspects on the card match what's on your leader and or base, give an example here, you pay no additional cost, you just pay it for the cost on the card. Easy enough. Now if you want to play a card where one of the aspects on the card do not match, so shown in the second box in the middle there, you have to pay an additional two resources on top of the cost of the card, which means if a card costs 2, that's an extra 2 on top, meaning 4. You now have double the cost of the card to play that card because one of the aspects doesn't match. So that's a good example there. And also do note that any aspect only covers one of itself. So if you were to play, say, a double green card, given this example, one of the green aspects would be covered by your base. Because you don't have another green aspect on your leader, you'd have to pay an extra 2 resources on top to cover that second green aspect, because aspects only cover one of themselves. So do bear that in mind for double aspect cards. And then lastly, we bring this to the last one, being the bottom box there, the 4 additional cost. Now, if you have a card that has 2 aspects on it, and both of those aspects do not match what's on your leader and or base, you have to pay a 4 additional cost on top of that card's cost, just to play it out. So once again, an example being, if the card normally costs 2, it's now going to cost 6, because remember it's 4 on top, which means it now costs triple the cost of the card, and that's a huge increase in its cost. But while the aspect penalty will be more like a negative in making the card's cost increased, sometimes it's worth paying that aspect penalty, because sometimes a card is just that great that you basically want to play in your deck, even if the aspects on it, or any of the aspects on it, don't match. And a perfect example are the double aspect events from set 1, because these offer 4 effects. They are 4 cost events that offer 4 effects. You could use any 2 of them and resolve them in however way you choose. And sometimes these are what you want to use, but you don't want to play a double aspect deck or a leader combo just to be able to play them. So you'll play them out of aspect in dual aspect decks and pay 6 instead of 4. And sometimes what the effect does is worth it, and sometimes that's basically just how it goes. So remember that while the aspect penalty does make a card more expensive, sometimes it's worth the extra cost because of what the card does. So that's the aspects. Now we're getting the last bit of information that is basic, which is the ratios. So with the ratios, we'll quickly go for this because essentially in any card game, you can play a certain amount of copies of any given card. And for Star Wars Unlimited, that is 3 copies of a card. So you can play up to 1, 2, or 3 copies of a card, and I'm going to quickly go over when you want that amount of cards in your deck. So start off with the maximum being 3 copies of a card. This is the ratio to help maximize the likelihood that the desired card is in your hand when needed. And examples are cards you want to play on the first turn, or cards you want to see in multiples over the course of the game. Now the example I use is Resupply because, like I said, Ramp is the green aspect, and if you're playing that aspect, you normally want Ramp. And Resupply is the cheapest and easiest ramp card to play, because it can be played as quickly and as early as turn 2, because it's a 3 cost card, and it's not restricted to either side. So it's not got heroic heroism on there, it's not got villainy on there, so you can play it on either side. It's not got 0/1, and it's quite easily because all you do is play this, and then you put into play as a resource, which means you ramp up straight away, and that can turn your basically make it so instead of going into 4 resources on your turn 3, you go to 5, which is a big jump, and now you should play bigger things early. And since you can play it very early at your turn 2, sometimes you just want to have as many maximum amount of copies on it to increase your likelihood of seeing that by your turn 2. So that is the 3 copies of a card. Next we have 2 copies of a card, and my example for this is Rebel's Fall, because this is usually the ratio for cards that aren't great that draw early in the game, but you still want to go through multiple copies over the course of the game. And other examples could be boss cards or high costing cards. And Rebel's Fall is my perfect example because there's removal in this game, and the cheaper it is, the more restrictive it is. The more expensive it is, the less restrictive it is. And when it comes to removal, there's a lot of times when they say a non-leader unit. So it means they can remove a unit in a specific way, but not a leader. And that's where Rifle's Fault is perfect, because it can defeat any unit, even leaders, no matter what. Now, if you were to draw this early, you don't want to have that. You want to have it later in the game when you can actually use it. And if you do draw it early, you have a resource in it, which means you lose access to it, or you keep it in hand, which means you're now limiting the amount of options you have because you're holding onto this just to be able to use it later on. So by having a little bit less copies than 3 down to 2, you're hopefully not seeing it too early in the game, but seeing it later in the game when you want to actually use it to defeat your opponent's leader. And that comes down now to the last one, being the 1 copy of a card, or tech choice as it's sometimes called. Now this is usually a ratio for cards that are added to a deck in specifically to counter a certain situation. And my perfect example is Restock, because it's added to decks to help counter hard control decks. Because what hard control decks do is, like they say with the name, is they focus on hard control, which is just controlling the game and that's it. They just want to keep control of the game, and since trying to win a game at Star Wars, you need to damage the opponent's base, and if you're controlling, you're not doing that. So what they usually do is wait till you deck out, and you start taking deck out damage. Now what that is for every time you go to draw a card, and if you can, you take 3 damage per. So if you were to draw cards in the resupply phase, and you can't draw 1, that's 3 damage. If you can't draw both, that's 6 damage. So hard control decks will focus on controlling the game, making sure they're always in control, and leave deck out damage to basically win the game for them. Now, if you play Restock, you can use it to put up to 4 cards in it, up to 4 cards in a discard pile back to the bottom of your deck in random order, and you can, with how the game plays, you can put itself back as one of those 4 cards, so you can loop itself to keep making you never deck out. And now hard control decks will have to focus on a different way to kind of win the game, rather than relying on deck out damage. So hopefully that's helped you understand the ratios when you want to have 3, 2, or 1 copies of a card. Now let's get into the aspect benefits of each of the different aspect combos. So the first one I like to do is cover the double aspect, because back in set 1, when we had very limited sets, we just had 1 set, only 1 leader in each aspect was beneficial in going double aspect. And luckily for us in Cunning, we had the best, Cunning had the best of the options. But now with 4 sets in, we've got a lot more, so we have 10 double aspect cards, and it now makes it so any leader is viable to go into it. It just might be better for some than others. Now, for Ackbar, since he's very generic, very generic, he doesn't really have a focus on anything, he's got more of a chance to have a benefit out of these. Now, as of dropping this, as of recording this, because I don't record it too far in advance, DJ is now suspended, so it's not actually useful, so we're going to ignore that. But then again, it's more of a card that was best with Han, so we'll basically ignore this, and I'll try and cut out the future ones. But with this double aspect, this is what you get. You're basically going to what double aspect does is essentially sacrifice a whole other aspect to have access to these, technically now 9 cards. So from set 1, you had Bodhi Rook, Cantina Bouncer, Cunning, all very nice ones, because you got Bodhi Rook being a nice, Bodhi Rook and Cantina Bouncer being having nice when played effects. So when you play them, you get the effect off, and having nice stats because you get to play out a unit and also get the benefit of their effect. And Bodhi Rook allowed you to rip a card out your opponent's hand that wasn't a unit. So if they got an event or an upgrade, rip it out their hand and they lose a card. Very nice hand control. And then Cantina Bouncer allowed you to bounce any non-leader unit back to the hand, being yours or your opponent's. Very nice there. And then Cunning was an amazingly good card, and the main reason why people wanted to go, or still do want to go, double Cunning, because it offers you 4 effects, and all the effects are strong. This is either you can bounce something 4 less power, you can rest 2 cards, you can give something 4 extra power, or you can make your opponent discard a random card from the hand. So very solid effects, and is one of the best reasons, or the best drives to go double Cunning for any combination. Not combination, but any leader. Now for set 2, we got New Adventure, Final Showdown, and DJ. Now DJ is now suspended, so you don't have to worry about that. But for New Adventure and Final Showdown, they're pretty nice. New Adventure is pretty nice. You can return a non-leader unit that costs 6 or less back to the owner's hand, and then they can free play that out back again. So you can kind of replay out stuff, and that's great for triggering things like when plays, for Bodhi and Cantina Bouncer there. And Final Showdown is kind of how it sounds. It's a Final Showdown. It allows you to basically restand all your units, but the downside is if you don't win the game after using it by the end of the turn, then you lose the game. So it's like an actual final gambit that you can use to try and push the last bit, last wave to try and finish off the game. Set 3, we got Jar Jar Binks, Chance of Palpatine, and Impropriety Among Thieves, which are pretty nice ones. Jar Jar Binks not so much, because it's missing the key text that it should have, or you would hope to have, being opponents, because it can just hit anyone. When it attacks, it can hit either any random unit or base, being even yours as well, so you can even damage yourself, thanks to Jar Jar being kind of a klutz. Then you got Chance of Palpatine being a nice one, pretty good solid stats for its cost, and essentially when it attacks, if anything was removed from play this phase, which is very easy to do in Cunning, you get a clone trooper token, and every time you play a token unit, it comes in ready thanks to Palpatine. So it's a pretty nice benefit there, and pretty solid card. You also got Impropriety Among Thieves, which essentially has got a huge amount of text, but what it does is make it that you and your opponent switch control of your choice to to a ready unit. So your opponent's ready unit and your ready unit switch places, and at the end of the turn they switch back. Now this is great because if you swing your opponent's unit that you took into something and then kill it, and they don't kill yours that they've basically gained control of, then you get yours back, but they don't get anything back. So theirs is gone. But you can only use it on active units. You can't use it on rested, so you got to make sure it's like one of the earliest things you do to make sure you can get the best thing for your opponent has. And then we have the Mandalorian. Now this is a pretty nice one because it's one of those new cards that are both a pilot and a unit that can pilot. So it can be played as a ground unit, as like just a normal unit like normal, or it can be played as an upgrade on a vehicle, which is normally in space, and then get a benefit there. So you can either rest 2 ground units when he's played as a unit, or upgrade on a vehicle and rest something that's in that same arena. And then he comes down with pretty solid stats for a ground unit, and pretty decent ones for an upgrade as well. So that's double aspect. So this can actually work quite well for Admiral Ackbar because of the fact that he's very generic and hasn't got focus. So if you feel like the double aspect stuff is beneficial, and even the stuff that you don't see normally from double aspect is good, you can go ahead and try out Ackbar as double yellow. Now before we move on to what happens when you add a different aspect to the mix with a base, we're going to first see what kind of Ackbar provides himself, because he provides you Cunning and the heroic side of Cunning. Now for the heroic side, you got some really nice stuff. You got some pretty good turn 1 openers like R2D2 and L3 3-7, which are pretty nice. R2 being able to help dig through a little bit quicker to find something you want as early as turn 1 by digging 3 cards more in your deck. And L3 being something you can even smuggle in if you want to, and also comes in shielded unless you want to capture basically rescue something that's been captured, which you normally get it out of shield. You also got the Millennium Falcon being a very nice space unit that can attack straight away because it comes in ready when you play it. And you even got the new Ahsoka Tano, which is very nice hand control because it offers you a body on board and also makes your opponent discard a card. And you get a benefit if they do discard a certain type of card, being a unit, you get the rest cycle there. So very nice, very nice card, a really good one. You also then got Han Solo from the new set, which basically is a really nice unit because it can also pilot on units. You can use it at all. It's like one of those cards that are now like upgrades that also can be played as units, or units that can also be upgrades. Offers a nice effect of being an ambush unit if you played it in ground unit, or being a good pilot if you do equip it to a vehicle. And then you have Home 1 being one of the newer space units, probably the bigger ones, and this can get a good benefit out of Ackbar because it can reduce its cost by 3 if your opponent has 3 or more space units. Since Ackbar can rest units, then give the controller of that unit a X-Wing token, you can tap your opponent's units down and keep giving them tokens. You can cheapen down Home 1s that can come out, and it even comes in with ambush as well, so it can attack the same turn as played. And it's a 7-6, like a 7-8, which is pretty good for a 6 cost. Then you have some nice events like Bamboozle and Spark Rebellion. Spark Rebellion being a hand control card, and Bamboozle being a disruption card you can even potentially play for free. So you have some nice options there in the heroic side. Now for the non-heroic side, you still have some nice cards. You still have some cheap, good plays as well. Like you mainly a few ground units you can play. You got Greedo and Crafty Smuggler for good turn 1 plays. Crafty Smuggler essentially being a non-heroic version of L3, being doing the same thing. A 2-cost unit can come in shielded, and Greedo being a good cheap 1-cost unit that has good power but very fragile, but then has a nice when defeated, which potentially do back some damage when defeated, which is cool. You also have Guerrilla Soldier, a pretty nice one now, which when played does free indirect damage to your opponent. And if any of that free indirect damage hits your opponent's base, you get to restand him so you can attack straight away that same turn. You also have Geonosis Patrol Fighter, which can then come down even cheaper thanks to Exploit, and then bounce when your opponent's 3 cost or less cards, which is nice to disrupt your opponent's plays. And then you've got a lot of good Cunning events as well. Like you've got Surprise Strike, something that allows you to attack with a unit, but give an increased power for that attack, being 3 more power. You've even got Whaley to be able to bounce anything that's not a leader back to the hand, which is cool. You even got Nada Tilden, which if you control only 1 unit, you can play out something with one of the same traits as that unit out for cheaper, and it comes out 5 cheaper than basically bring out something bigger than your actual resources, which is cool. Then you've even got things like Commandeer, where you basically take one of your opponent's vehicles that doesn't have a pilot on it, take control of it, restand it if it's rested, and then at the end of the turn, if it's still there on your board, you got to put it back in their opponent's hand. So some pretty nice stuff in Cunning. Now let's see if we put a different aspect in a base to the mix, what you kind of get like as a benefit. So starting off with Vigilance, this is a pretty nice one because you got a lot of good healing and defensive effects and stuff. So you get some nice units, like you get a nice turn 1 play and restored arc, being a way to place something in the space unit arena, and also have healing, but being able to heal your base with restore. And this is nice because it's got 3 health and 2 power, which you can take out if you do rest your opponent's units to kind of stop them from attacking, be given a space token. You can take out that token using this and still survive. You even got some nice free cost units, and you even got some nice ones in like Yoda being a very good unit, where it offers healing when it attacks, and if it's defeated, you can draw back a card by choosing yourself and drawing a card. You got some nice Sentinels as well in Conquer Dawn Interceptor for a space, and then Village Protectors for ground, being nice Sentinels that potentially make it so if your opponent gets anything else in on that same arena or your base, you have to go for that unit first. And you get some nice bigger units like Kanan, Obi-Wan, Luke, and Redemption as well, being nice big units that give you some good solid benefits. So that's the heroic side of Vigilance. Then on the non-heroic side, that's where it kind of dwindles a bit in terms of like units. You get better ones in the dark or light side for Vigilance, not so much in just Vigilance. But you do have some good ones like Regional Governor being a nice one to be able to, when it comes down, you can call any card, and while she's in play, your opponent can't play that card at all, so you can kind of shut off things you don't want your opponent to play. You even got Outer Rim Outlaws as well, being a nice unit, comes down for a free, like it's basically a crafty smuggler, but it costs more, but increased stats as well, and comes in shielded, pretty nice one there. And you've also got some nice other units like Survivor Scoutless, be able to mess around with your opponent's upgrades or even move yours about, and even in Cargo Juggernaut to be able to heal as well, but having a unit on board. You also have some nice upgrades like Entrenched and Parasition being nice upgrades to kind of disrupt your opponent and help yourself out. And then you have Takedown and Rival's Fall being nice removal events, offering you various ways to remove. So if you feel like you want to play more controlling focus with Ackbar, which could be a good way, then you can go ahead and try it with Vigilance. Next we've got is Command. Now this command is a very good one because it offers you ramp, which means you can play out some bigger things quicker, and there are some things you might want, or you can play out a lot of things earlier, and some pretty nice things you get. And given that Ackbar is a rebel, you can kind of make use of that rebel trait, and you've got some nice cards, well, a lot of good rebels in Command. So you've got Mon Mothma and Phoenix Squadron as good turn 1 plays. Mon Mothma is like a searcher for rebels that you can play. So when she plays, look at the top 5 cards, find a rebel, add it to your hand, draw it, and put the rest of the bottom of your deck in random order. So pretty nice searcher for there. And then you've got Phoenix Squadron A-Wing being a nice big space unit, or nice like powerful space unit you can play as it is turn 1. You're doing that you turn 2 plays like Ackbar himself, and also Blue Leader being nice ones, being Ackbar being able to come down and do damage to a unit in that arena equal to the number of units you have in that same arena, so you can potentially hit for a load, or just that little bit to finish it off. And you got Blue Leader being like a nice little ambush space unit. It can even switch arenas if you've got the extra 2 resources to play on top of its cost. You also got some nice other big space units like Home 1 being a nice Sentinel 1 space, which is cool. It can even bounce something on the ground back to hand to basically reuse it again. And even Home 1 as well as a nice solid big one that can even bring out more units from your discard at a cheaper cost. You also got Chewbacca as a good example of some like very good punch you can get, and it offers you a nice option for against hard control because while it's out on the board either as an upgrade on a vehicle or as a ground unit, it can't be bounced or defeated by enemy card abilities, which means it's nice protecting that unit you put on or itself while it's in the ground arena, offers a kind of way to combat against control. And then you got nice events like Reinforcement where you can just look at the top 10 cards of your deck, play up to 3 cards whose total cost is 7 or less, out for free from those top 10. And in the non-heroic side of Command, you got some pretty nice stuff. Like you got good units that you can play out, like Colonel Yularen for a bit more heal, and even Scanning Officer to kind of disrupt things like Han, or even like smuggle strategies. You also have Hu Yang being a nice one, which can come down, boost up a unit, and that unit doesn't lose the boost until Hu Yang is gone, so you don't have to deal with that, and maybe or deal with the unit that is boosted, depends how they feel. You also have some bigger units as well, like Resupply Carrier being extra kind of ramp in a space unit, and also Reinforcement Walker being a nice big unit that offers either drawing more cards or healing your base depending on what you choose for its effect. You also then have some nice events like you got Time Invention, Dogfight, and Resupply being good ones. Resupply being an easy, really nice ramp. Dogfight allowing you to attack with a unit even if it's rested, but it can't attack bases. You can have a unit to attack twice, but use it to kind of like clear boards, which is nice. And even Tiny Adventure is a nice way to play out a unit for a bit more of a cost than its usual cost, but give it Ambush, which is a very powerful keyword skill because it allows you to attack the same turn it's played. Now, this is what you can kind of get for commands. If you feel like you want to ramp up and kind of get Ackbar out quicker, and also get at bigger things quicker, command is a perfect one to go for. Now that brings us to the last one, being aggression. Now this offers a very aggressive route to take, and there's a lot of good stuff in aggression if you want to basically play aggressive, or even just generally to have in the heroic side at least. You got some good space units that you got Green Squadron A-Wing and Red 5 being very good ones. Green Squadron being a very good turn 1 play, while Red 5 is a nice way to kind of even do more damage to things that have been chipped away at and taken the damage, which is cool. You even got some nice space units like Stella Guerrera and Cassian Andor being nice ones. Cassian being a solid statted unit for its cost, and can even be smuggled out. If you do smuggle him out, he comes in active, so you can attack straight away, making for a very aggressive aggressive play. And then Stella's a nice one where you can do damage to your base when she's played or defeated to kind of find those tactics, and there are quite a few good tactics and very nice ones in both, in basically all aspects really. So a nice way to kind of increase your hand size by drawing some more cards that are very useful and basically searching for some useful, helpful cards to kind of help you fight the game. Now there are some bigger units that you got, like some nice ones like Poe and Wrecker being nice big ones that offer some nice effects, because Poe's got multiple effects when he attacks to kind of range from like damage to knocking off upgrades, or even to being able to discard cards from hand. That's the other one. I forget because I never really see it used. And then Wrecker has a nice way when played to kill off one of your own resources, just to go ahead and do 5 damage to a ground unit and offer some very solid stats and some overpowering muscle, thanks to having Overwhelm as well as a huge attack stat. And then you got some nice events as well that you got 4 calls, I believe in, being a nice way to kind of burn more and kind of go very aggressive by doing more damage to your opponent's base without needing to attack. And even They Hate That Ship, allowing you to play a vehicle unit out cheaper, but you gave your opponent 2 TIE Fighter tokens, but it's not too bad because those TIE Fighter tokens are just 2 1/1s, which aren't going to make much impact depending on what you play out. And then we've got some pretty good aggression units that are not heroic. So you got things like the Singing Fangfighter being very nice because they knock off those opposing upgrades. You can knock off your opponents like lightsabers or even their pilots from their units. You got Champs and Doula, which if your opponent's been ramping or your opponent's ahead on resources and you're behind, you can use this to equalize it by basically bringing out a nice body and also ramping up to catch up, but only if you're down in resources compared to your opponent. Then you got some nice bigger units like War Juggernaut and Crate Dragon. War Juggernaut will be able to come down, especially when partnered with They Hate the Ship, because you can play it with this Hate the Ship. They get 2 1/1 tokens, but then War Juggernaut comes out, and his effect is when played, you can deal out like 1 damage to any number of units on board. So you can take out those 2 1/1s by just popping it with this, and they get something, but then they lose it, and you still got your unit you brought out a little bit cheaper. And then it also gets powered up for every damage you on the board. So if you damage everything on board, it gets even more powerful and can hit very hard very quickly. And then you even got Crate Dragon being like the big end game to aggression, where once it comes down, anytime your opponent plays a card, no matter how many cards they play, you get to do damage to either one of their ground units or their base equal to the cost of that card. And it also hits hard, but at 10-10, and even has overwhelm the pierce damage for your units too. And then you also have some nice events as well. Like you have System Shock as well, would be a nice one to knock off non-leader upgrades off your opponent's units, and then deal damage to that unit you knocked it off. You got Open Fire to do damage to a unit, which is pretty cool. You got Pillage to make your opponent discard cards from the hand as well, and you even got Bombing Run to be able to force your opponent to take to do damage to everything in that one arena, if it's space or the ground unit, depending on what you choose. So you deal damage to all units, even your own, in that arena. So if you're a very aggressive playstyle, or just to throw out damage and control the game a little bit easier through damage instead of using Vigilance, then aggression is a perfect one for you to go for. And also, like I said, there are also Heroism cards that are just Heroism, not just partnered with everyone. So you've got some cards that are just heroic. Then you got some nice ones here like R2, Tech, Fleet Lieutenant, and Sabine, with R2 being a nice one that allows a nice pilot that you can put on a unit, and it has the unique effect of being able to put on a unit that already has a pilot on it, and then allow you to put more pilots on it thanks to its own effect. And you can pilot it on for free, so you don't have to worry about paying any resources for it. You also got tech, which allows you to turn all your resources into smuggle, so it gives all your units, even if they don't have smuggle, a smuggle cost. So you can always then turn your resources into your second hand. You got Fleet Lieutenant to make use of that rebel trait by allowing you to attack with a unit that has a rebel trait, and then it gets 2 extra power for that unit. Well, allowing you to attack with a unit, and if they have the rebel trait, they get extra 2 power for that attack. And Sabine being a perfect one where it comes out solid cost for the unit, so free cost, free. And when you attack, depending on however many units you have, well, any cards on board that have aspects, you can get a benefit of that aspect. So if you've got a blue one, you get the heal, green one gives experience, red one does damage, and yellow one restands, exhausts or readies a resource. So you've got some nice cards there. This is not all of them, but probably the better ones you can probably find. And now that brings us to the last part of the video, which is my preferred preferences. Now, the thing is, when I first started doing this, I didn't have this in, but then I kept getting requests for it while I was doing the first few seasons. So I thought when it comes to the third season, I put this in because I like to improve the series and make sure you got that extra little bit of help. Because if you're thinking, how do I want to build like Ackbar, but you're unsure, you got this little bit of help where you got like how I would play it. So if I were to play Ackbar, I would go for Command as in a company with it as my base, because you get access to some really nice cards, like some very nice base units like Blue Leader and Home 1, and even a nice unit event like UE Reinforcement to bring out loads of units like on board and just spam the board and just overwhelm your opponent with all these big things. But if I weren't playing Command, I'll probably go Vigilance because you get some nice stuff, and I do love my blue decks. I do love blue, and you get some nice effects, and you got a lot of good defense and like Sentinels for your arena. You get some nice reduction effects, removal effects, and a nice lot of removal in events and also effects as well. It makes very good use of Ackbar. And that is it for the video. So hopefully that's helped you understand how to build Admiral Ackbar and make it so it suits you and your playstyle. Now, do remember that this is like we're coming to near the end of the series as well, because we're coming up to the last of the leaders in the set for tomorrow, and also we have the 2 starter deck leaders next week as well. So thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.